Hello, everybody. All right. It is Sunday, August 18th. I think with my normal every other week streaming schedule, let me line this up so I'm looking in the right place here. I should have streamed last weekend and I didn't. Forgot why. I was just busy with other things. So welcome back. I don't know. Anyway, 3 things from the library to start today. Let's see. First, we've been working our way through Rolling Thunder Review, a Bob Dylan story by Martin Scorsese. This is a very long, let's see here. I think it's not very long, and almost 3-hour. It's not even that really. Gosh, maybe I'm almost done with it. We took a break thinking like, oh, there's still like half of this left, and it's only 142 minutes. So actually, there might not be that much more. Anyway, it's about his tour that he did after like a 10-year hiatus. So, and I am not a Bob Dylan expert, but Bob Dylan 101. He blew up in like 66, 64, 66, something like that. Was massive. Decided maybe I'm maybe filling in this gap for him. I wanted to say he got overwhelmed by it and checked out, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. In any case, he checked out. He withdrew from the whole touring superstar thing for about 10 years, came back around 76 with this tour he was doing, where he gathered up a bunch of other folk artists and they just went around and did their own thing across the country. I was talking about this documentary with Josh Campbell on the Crestline Art Retreat a few weeks ago. And he shorthanded it as the Painted Face Tour. It's the tour where Bob Dylan, for Bob Dylan reasons, was painting his face white. And it was just kind of weird and funky. Anyway, as I was talking about with Josh in that conversation, I've just kind of recently developed an appreciation or an interest in Bob Dylan. Of course, I was always aware of him growing up. I mean, how can you not be aware of Bob Dylan? But other than a couple songs, like his music didn't hit me the way other things did. Like I was just aware of him. I didn't dislike, but I wouldn't have said I liked. I just was aware. As I've gotten older, I think it's been Bob Dylan as just an artist has been reintroduced to me in ways that I think are easier for me to appreciate now. And I've gotten more curious about him, maybe more academically than like I can't say, for example, I can't say I'm really into his music. There's stuff of it I really like, but overall, someone's like, oh, you think you're into Bob Dylan now? Name me 5 Bob Dylan songs. I don't even know maybe I could do 5. I don't think I could do 10. And if you ask me to name how many Bob Dylan songs do you really like, it's like 2 or 3. So again, it's more of an academic or a cultural interest. But most of all, and this is part of what I was looking for in this, and you get a little bit of it, I'm fascinated by how he chooses to relate to not only the audience, but specifically critics, journalists, like all the people trying to make sense of this guy. He landed, he was a big deal, and now everyone wants to write what makes Bob Dylan tick, and what does his music mean? And what is he thinking about? And where is he coming from? And like, there's all this fascination in him and his process. And it seems like his reaction to that was like to wave it away. Like, I don't want to go there with you. I don't really want to talk about it. And I think, to me, maybe people who are more well-versed in Bob Dylan could answer this, but to me, as sort of just getting acquainted, it's hard for me to tell, is he not interested in that kind of introspection or analysis in general? Like, he doesn't even do it for himself? Or is he not interested in doing it publicly? Is he not interested in giving you the crib notes to his, or the cheat sheet to his work? I don't know. He's just sort of an interesting figure. And like I said, because I've gone my whole life aware of him, but not really knowing about him, it's kind of fun now at this stage to circle back and try to educate myself on Bob Dylan. So that's number one, Bob Dylan. Number two, H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness Deluxe Edition, adaptation and artwork by Go Tanabe. Now, I had the original manga version of this, which came in 2 parts, and it was, I mean, much, much smaller. I don't have it nearby, but it was probably about the size of like a DVD case, like that. So this is significantly bigger. It combines the 2 parts into one. I don't know if you can see this. It has a cool metallic, yeah, you can see the shine there. Silver, yeah, there you go. Whatever, however you refer to this, it's not the binding, it's the outward, like a coating on the pages. We got the ribbon page markers. This, if you are a fan of Making Comics, the podcast, you might remember I named this as, I think, my favorite. I don't remember if it was my favorite book of 2023, like comic, or my favorite artist. It was one or the other, or maybe both. I don't know, but that was treating the 2 volumes as one, like combining them is my favorite. This edition came out larger, combined. I had to have it because I liked the original so much, and I'm so glad I picked it up. It is, his art is so phenomenal in this. It's so great to see it larger. I would have bought a book twice as big as this. Like if we took this and doubled it this way, like a coffee table size edition, I would buy that. I mean, his art, it really, now reading this version, the smaller 2-part version feels like a crime. It's just so inadequate to really show off what he's doing, especially with the backgrounds and things like that, that you're not really getting a good picture of in the smaller edition. So I'm very excited about this. This, I don't remember if I mentioned this in the Making Comics podcast when I was talking about it, but not only this is probably my favorite Lovecraft story, At the Mountains of Madness. This is my favorite version of it. I prefer this even just to reading it, like the actual Lovecraft original. But the main reason I think I originally checked this out is early research into the 5th DvsM. And I refuse to elaborate. So I was especially excited to get this, and really, like, this will become a book that I not only revisit, I'm sure, in the years to come, just as a book that I like. I intend to be revisiting it in the ramp up to writing and drawing DvsM 5. When would that be? A year and a half from now or something. Okay. And then finally, this is a Fantagraphics collection. This is actually part 1 of 2. So I would lump 2 in with this. Streets of Paris, Streets of Murder, the complete graphic noir of and I've never known how to pronounce this writer's name. I think it's Manchette and Tardy. Tardy is one of my favorite comic artists and writers. He's a Frenchman. He did an amazing two-part set about World War I, the Great War, that I talked about for the Indie Comic Review show when it was going on with Josh Kemble and Corey Kerr. Anyway, this is his two-part collection of illustrating Manchette's PI noir tales set in, I believe it's like 70s Paris. And if you like noir, if you like European comics, if you like Tardy, if you like, if any of that even sound, if you even just like the idea of like dirty bourbon-soaked PIs and, you know, femme fatales and creeping around like the Paris underworld and meeting all these shady borderline characters. Is this person going to help you? Is this person going to shoot you? Kind of idea. You'll love this, and especially if you love comics. And, you know, Fantagraphics, I'm a big Fantagraphics nerd. I love their work, but I love this collection. And I've just, this doesn't have anything to do with DvsM, that doesn't have anything to do with prep, other than just reading a comic I love. But I was revisiting this just because it had been a while since I read it, and it was sitting on my coffee table when I was wandering around the house trying to figure out what 3 things am I going to show you guys. So that was the last one. All right. What are we talking about today? So if you read, Chaos and Comics. By the way, absolutely follow this person, but this Tardy book is on my list. It's great. I don't know if that means you've read it or it's on like your favorite list or whatever, but I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of anything Tardy, like frankly. But this is up there. I don't adore it as much as his World War I stuff, but it's right up there. It's right up there. Yes. Yeah, and that's been the one frustration if you're a fan, is Fantagraphics has been, I don't know, has anyone been doing translating other than Fantagraphics? I don't know that offhand, but my impression is it's pretty much them. But there's a lot of stuff that just has never made it into English. In addition, they have done some English editions of things that they've just let go out of print. And I think I've at least a couple times emailed Fantagraphics, who knows if they ever get to anybody, and said, please do a new edition of this. Please do a new edition of this, because I only discovered him, how long ago? I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. And, you know, of course, this guy has had this massive career, and other people have been aware of him. You know, when I was a little kid, they were aware of him. So for them, he's old news. To me, it's like, whoa, this is this great old thing that I found. And it's like, I want all his stuff now. And since I don't speak French, it's frustrating. Okay. DvsM number 4, aka DvsM 2001. Where are we at? I am still getting ready to draw. To hit the timeline I want to hit, to get DvsM 2001 out when I want it to be out, because we've talked about this before. I try to do a DvsM every other year, or try to get one out every other year. They take a long time. There's a lot of prep, and then there's a lot of drawing because they're fat books. So every other year is, that might sound slow. It's not. It's actually, I very rarely not in some stage of working on a comic, whether it's writing one or doing a lot of prep for drawing or drawing. The only time I'm not really working on a comic is like a few months in between. Like I'll take a couple months off and then I'll be like, all right, let's start outlining or coming up with the story for the next one. That's not actually true. I have outlines for all of them, but start developing it and come up with like, what's an actual story? What is this going to be? So I want DvsM 2001 to come out next year, late next year. To do that, knowing the page count I have for it, and knowing that it takes me a week to draw a page, knowing how many pages I have, I know that if I want to hit that deadline, and then allowing for time of like, once I finish drawing, I need to do a cover, I need to do an introduction, I need to write all the ancillary stuff, I need to submit it to Comics Wellspring, I need to wait for physical proof to come, I need to look over, I need to allow time for changes or revisions or corrections, then I gotta wait for the order to come up, and I got a bag and board. Like there's all this time in there that I need to allow for. Blah, blah, blah. To get it out where you can buy it and read it before the end of 2025, I really need to start drawing page 1 sometime in October. Now, I would love to start drawing it the first Saturday in October. That would be great. It could be later and I could still hit my deadline, but that's why I'm trying to wrap everything up by October. Everything I need to still do before I'm ready to draw. So what do I still need to do before I start drawing? In those 6 to 8 weeks that are left, which sounds like a lot, but given the things I still need to do, and given the fact I have a day job and a normal life, I need to stay on task, which is part of why I'm doing the video today, is to say the things I need to do to create some external accountability to pair with my internal pressure. Okay, so first, reference shots. I like to take reference photos of people to use as a basis for drawing people in DvsM. I think I'll probably do lots more videos on how I use reference, why I use reference, the pros and cons of reference, all of that. The short version that I'm just going to give you right now is there's 2 main reasons. First of all, I think you find all sorts of little things and working with actual people that adds little touches to your drawings that are fun. I get a lot of comments and compliments and feedback on my books about, one thing is like hand acting, like what people are doing with their hands when they're talking and how it looks kind of good and interesting. Some of that is from working with a live model and then doing things like, oh, I could draw that. That's kind of a fun idea. Little micro expressions, little reactions to dialogue, little, subtle things they're doing with their face. I think it adds a lot. But second, and maybe most importantly, I always felt when I set out to do DvsM, for all sorts of different reasons, I want the biggest suspension of disbelief that I'm asking of the reader to be with when an alien shows up or when a dinosaur shows up. Everything else I want them to accept as just, this is the real world. This is what things look like. This is what people look like. This is how they talk. This is, all of that. I wanted it very grounded. I wanted it not traditionally comic booky. I didn't want it cartoony. I wanted it a little more sterile. I wanted it a little clinical looking. I don't know if that's exactly the right word, for reasons. Mostly for the story I'm trying to tell, and I think by the time I finish all 6 and people look back, they'll understand more clearly why I was doing the things I was doing. But most of all, I was chasing this idea of this actually took place. These are real stories leaked to me, and I'm just illustrating them. This is like an Unsolved Mysteries or something, And in keeping with that, I didn't want super stylized humans and super stylized environments and all of that. I wanted it to feel realistic. It's not going to feel real. It's still stylized. It's black and white, but maybe you know what I'm getting. Anyway, DvsM 2001 has more characters in it, more human characters in it than any other DvsM I've done so far. So I've been lining up a bunch of different people to stand in as different characters. Some people are going to look wildly different. You won't even recognize them. Some people will probably look pretty close, and you'll be able to say, oh, I bet that's, especially if you're in the Artcasters Making Comics extended family, you'll recognize some people. I have already done photos of 3 people. I definitely need to take pictures of 3 more. And then there's 2 more that after that that are kind of nice to have, but I don't need. I could just use myself, which is something I've done a lot for DvsM. For a lot of the DvsMs, if you see an alien, it was probably me posing. If you see some background character, I remember in the most recent one, 79, there's a group of soldiers at one point. You see getting ready to do a thing. I think I'm all of them. Like hopefully, I'm just tweaking myself for every single one, but I sat and took pictures of myself just to get some basic postures, and then went and this guy's got a weird mustache. This guy's tall. This guy's whatever. And I'm like changing them all up and individualizing. I might do that for 2 of the 5 remaining characters that I need to think about. Just use myself. But if I can think of somebody, if there is someone who's available, if it seems like, oh, that might even be better, I might do that. So that's something that takes time. Each one of these photo sessions takes 1 to 2 hours. Depending, one of these that I'm thinking of will only take 15 minutes. I only need like 6 pictures, but some of them will take maybe an hour. And then usually the deal I do is, if you are willing to help me out in this way, like, let me take you to lunch, let me take you to dinner. Well, that's some time too. So and then you're scheduling, you're trying to, everyone is as busy as me, trying to find someone who's available for a block of time to take some pictures and then whatever. So that's something I need to do in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And the same vein, outdoor location references. So with and always, as always, trying to avoid major spoilers. DvsM 2001 mostly takes not completely, mostly takes place outside, in a forested area in sort of central eastern Arizona. So it's mountainous and foresty, and it's terrain that people who have never been to Arizona might be surprised exists in Arizona. I know for a lot of people, Arizona is what? It's like saguaro cactuses and desert. Yeah, a lot of it. But we also have mountains and forests and snow and, different kinds of environments all over. And the area that this is set in is one of those kinds of places. As fans of the series already know, I am a detail wonk. Like I usually try to get the details correct. Different forests have different kinds of trees, and they have different horizon lines. Like what does that mountain look like from that angle, and what does the horizon look like if you're facing south versus north in this particular area of Arizona, and what kinds of trees are in that forest, and what does the terrain look like? Is there grass? Is it just basically just covered in pine cones and pine needles? What kind of rocks are we looking at? Is it lava rock? Is it something else? Like those are details I want to dial in. If I'm saying these guys are in this part of Arizona, and I'm basically referencing pine trees and what the terrain looks like in a totally different part of Arizona, would 95% of readers care? Absolutely not. But some would, but I'm not even doing it for them. I'm doing it for me. It's kind of like drawing, my approach to drawing people. I want it to look right. I want it to look like that's what a person looks like. That's how they hold a gun. That's how they would climb this thing. That's how they would fall down. That's what an injury looks like. Like, I'm always trying to be real world. To me, part of that is, and especially since I live in Arizona, and even the farthest part of Arizona is 6 or 7 hours away, and I don't have kids, and this is my passion after, my day job, like I have this, why not drive out there and take 200 photos of that forest just to get a real good bank of reference? So when I have to draw some trees or draw what the mountains look like or whatever, like, I know exactly what they look like. I can refer to my folder from my little day trip out to some far off part of Arizona. So I need to do that. Now, that is proving to be a little tricky, and it's going to take place in September. There are different elements of outdoors that I want, and in doing my research, of course, some areas that would be really useful for me to see are maybe like 2 hours away, which is basically nothing. Other areas that would also be very useful for me to see, and where a chunk of the story is set, are like 5 hours away. And that's a commitment. Especially for Mary, my girlfriend, who I had initially said, like, hey, let's do like maybe an overnight or a day trip or something out to this pretty woods, and like, we'll make a day of it, and we'll get breakfast and lunch, and we'll see some pretty scenery, and I'll be able to take pictures for the comic. That's a very easy ask, and it's very nice of her to more or less put up with if it's a 2-hour trip one way. If it's a 5-hour drive just basically to look at some like weird cliff someplace, that's a big ask. So what it's looking like now is I will probably spend one weekend day trip with Mary with some shooting. And then the following weekend, I'll just go out by myself to the 5-hour away spot and do some photos of that place. And just, not like, I'll just do that myself, because I'm not going to ask someone to go through that 10 hours in a car on a single day just to get some pictures of a funny particular location. Like, that's asking a lot. Okay, there's that. There is a scene. This doesn't really spoil anything. It'll be the first few pages of the book. There's a scene where characters are in a good old-fashioned rural gas station, Arizona gas station. And that's the kind of thing that's easy to write in a script. But then when, for writer Gary, but then when artist Gary has to draw that, there's a lot of questions. What does an old-timey Arizona rural gas station look like? I've seen them a lot in my life because I grew up here. But when you actually have to draw that, like, so I got to do a lot of research on that. I don't know of any offhand. Maybe when I do this road trip, I'll happen to stumble on one and ask the guy, like, do you mind if I take some pictures of the inside of this place just to get, my brain going? But probably what I'll have to do is just spend a little while Googling and start sketching out basically in my head. So the counter is probably here, and then we'll have this stuff on the wall behind the cashier, and we'll have this stuff on the counter in front of the cashier, and I guess there's probably like a lottery thing here, like trying to figure out like what would that look like. That's something. And then gas pumps. You're going to see a gas pump at some point. 2001. What does a 2001 gas pump look like? Again, this is like everything with DvsM. Will 90% of readers care if I get the gas pump exactly right? No, I care. And I do believe, and I talked about this, I think, in Making Comics podcast, the people who are into DvsM, I think, appreciate those details more than the average comic reader. So I have created a little bit of a monster for myself. I don't mind it. I mean, obviously this is my process and this is how I like to do it. But, you know, I think they would be disappointed if I just started cheating. Let's see here. Case of Comics. I've been reading your series from the beginning, but I can't remember where I left off. I'm trying to remember too. I think you might be, if I remember, I know you read 75 because I think you reviewed it on your channel. I know you bought 97. I don't remember, because I know you, like me, have a giant backlog. I don't know if you read it. And I don't know. I don't remember if you might have gotten 79, which is the latest one. So let me know if you're behind and I'll fix you up. What else? Okay, so a gas station. Again, in the same vein. There's only a few panels of this, but enough where I need to dial it in my head. You see a 1999 Chevy Suburban in a few panels. So I need a reference for that. I pulled some pictures off the internet. I hope they'll be enough. I'm not happy with interior views that I have. What I would like to do, and I'll probably look at as soon as I get done streaming today. This is something I thought about with the Dodge Monaco in 75. I'm going to just look to see if someone here in Phoenix is selling a 1999 Chevy Suburban. And I'll offer to Venmo them 20 bucks if I can come and take some pictures of it or something. You know, because I know very specifically what I need, and it's frustrating trying to Google like 1999 Chevy Suburban interior, 1999 Chevy Suburban interior from the front, 1999 Chevy Suburban interior from the front, middle bench seat. Like, you know, if I'm trying to really dial in, like, what does this specific view look like? It's hard. So I'm going to look to see if someone's maybe selling one, or if there's one around where I can just go look at it. I'm sure someone, you know, they'd think it was a weird request, but they'd be happy to do it. I think that's basically, there's some other things here that are a little spoilery and specific that I don't want to name. But those are the big things. And so I think maybe you can see, even with 6 weeks to go, that's not a small amount of things. Like, that's, like, I have stuff to do, and they're all things that are going to take time that I need to schedule. I need to look at my calendar. I need to look at free weekends. I need to figure out, you know, when can I manage this? And especially like the coordinating with other people for photos. That is the biggest time tricky thing, because it's very easy for me to look at my calendar and say, I'm not doing anything this weekend. I'll drive out to Apache Sitgreaves Forest and, you know, look for some cliffs or look for this or whatever, you know, just to get some nice visual reference. I can do that spontaneously and pretty much decide it's going to happen. Saying, like, there's this character, I need to get some poses, you know, I would like to get some reference poses. Like, you got to reach out to that person. You got to see if they're available. You got to work around their schedule. You got to figure out where you're going to do that. There's a whole thing that it might be best case scenario. Like, well, I'm not going to be able to do it for a few weeks. And then before you know it, like, okay, now we're getting close to October. So this is what I'm trying to pick through right now. What's interesting about the photo thing, this is I think the last thing I have for today. And then it looks like there is going to be a guest. I am playing, like I said, I've shot 3 people so far, photographs. I am going faster and looser with the photos this time than in the past. And the main reason is I think I can. In the past, hey, Dylan, I hope you're having a good weekend. In the past, I have spent a lot of time with photos and really trying to coach and direct out of the people who are sitting, like exactly the face I'm looking for, exactly the pose I'm looking for. And when possible, like, if you have clothes like these, can you wear these clothes because they're similar to that character? Or, you know, really trying to get it as close as I can to where I want to end up drawing this. To the point that even in 79, with Mary's character, Dr. Wagner, I went and bought some vintage pieces to have, like, as a reference, or to have her wear, so I can get a sense of how that actually looks on her frame for when I'm drawing, you know? And what I found was all that extra time being spent, like hours taking pictures, as opposed to like about an hour is what I've been taking now. I didn't feel like it was really helping me that much with the drawing because I was changing so much in the drawing. And in fact, I think in some cases it was a frustration because I was working around what I had photographed. I was farther from where I wanted to be rather than closer because I'd been so specific with my photo. So now I'm just kind of, my approach with the photography has been, that's in the ballpark. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Like, that's great. You know, that pretty good is good enough for what I'm doing now. As a result, because I've made that decision, I'm with little tiny exceptions, I don't even have the people I've been shooting dressing any particular way. It's just sort of wear whatever. Like, because to be honest, I don't even know exactly what these characters are wearing. I have some ideas, I have some sketches, but I haven't committed to anything. The only minor exception, like one of the characters, I bought this actual vintage trucker cap for R&R Automotive in Flagstaff, Arizona. I don't even know if this place still exists, but this is a thing. One of the characters I imagined is wearing a trucker cap of some like weird local specific Arizona thing. The person who's standing in for that character, I had them wear this because I knew the character will be wearing this, and it has a logo, and it will help me in drawing it to actually, rather than every time look at this hat and try and like draw the logo from that angle, it's like it'll be helpful if you're wearing this. And also to see where it rides on your head. There was another character I did the same thing. He was wearing a beanie. I had him wear a beanie because I didn't want to like always be thinking about adding a beanie to this person's, you know, just from my imagination. It's like, what does that look like again from here? What does it look like? But other than that, I think mostly the people I've been shooting are wearing like t-shirts and shorts, and they will not be wearing t-shirts and shorts. And look, they'll be wearing hiking boots. They don't have hiking boots. I have them holding like a little cardboard fake rifle in some cases that just gives me a sense of where is the trigger hand in relation to the hand on the grip. But it's not 3D. Like I'm not worrying about like, oh, I should really try and dial in. I just want to see like how far apart are your hands. It's like very basic stuff, very basic. Just give me a figure ref, and I'll take it from there. Because again, I found that's what I was doing anyway. Even if I really labored over getting the perfect photograph, it was kind of wasted effort, and it feels like a bigger ask of the people I'm asking to sit. If I'm really be like, no, can you raise your eyebrow? Are you able to raise your eyebrow a little more? I want to see a little more tension like in your cheeks. Can you kind of like grind your jaw a little bit? Let me see. Like, I don't want to do that stuff anymore. It doesn't matter. I can draw all those little details. It's exhausting. Like, good enough is good enough. Okay. I think let's check the chat and then bring in a guest. Let's see here. Yes. Got a lot of rain. Woke up from thunder last night. It was really loud. Normally I'm a pretty sound sleeper. It startled me. It was like it felt like it was directly overhead. It sounded like an explosion. What's the name of the hat? I'll look it up. R&R Automotive in Flagstaff, Arizona. You're going to see a lot of this hat in DvsM 2001, among a million other things. Okay. So we have a guest. Let's not do a lot of preamble and nonsense and masturbatory bullshit. That's a technical term. Keith Foster.
What's up? What's up, man? It's going good. It's going good. I'm dealing with I was dealing with a little altitude disaster.
Oh,
fun fact. If you know this, so this is I'm up in the Crestline house, right?
Yeah.
And something that happens often is that the air pressure is different up here. So if you bring a beer and then let it sit for a while and you open it, boom, right? So I definitely poured some out for the homies here without expecting to. So I was actually ready about 2 minutes ago, and then I wasn't ready.
I saw that, and I didn't know if you're having technical difficulties, but apparently you're having altitude difficulties.
Yes, okay. I had technical difficulties and then beer altitudical difficulties. What are you gonna do? What are you
gonna do? Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, man. So it sounds like you're just getting close to it, huh? But you haven't started drawing yet.
Close to it. Yeah, it's the final stretch. It's the final stretch. It's that point where I need to be very organized for the next 6 weeks, or I'm not going to hit goals. So, I think you would agree. Anytime you're working on anything, like 6 weeks sounds like a lot. It's not a lot. Like it'll go quick. Yeah. So.
Yeah, especially when you factor in like life, you can have hey, what's up, Dylan? You can have the best plans, but did you incorporate any little thing you do? Did you incorporate the fact that, in my case, I'm dropping off my kid at college next week? Did you incorporate the family parties that are happening, that you want to attend? Because we know that being creative on some level means saying no to that on some level, right? But yeah, anyway, so, planning can often get really granular for that. And the time flies, and it flies even more if you're like, well, looks like I'm not working today.
Well, and I have a lot of incentive, and again, these dates are arbitrary, and if comic slips, like I've usually been pretty relaxed about, look, when it's done, and it's ready when it's ready, and it gets submitted to the printer when I'm happy. But being able to start drawing the first weekend in October just would feel great, and it gives me more room for the coming year where if something happens where I don't get a lot of drawing done 1 week and I need to basically push a week, it's fine. Like it gives me wiggle room to kind of just not be so freaked out about like, oh, am I going to miss it? Not that I would freak out that much, but it would just feel good to really start being successful at the every other year release.
No, I can relate to that too, because I recently, actually, I think this is new. Like, I don't think I've even mentioned it to you. It's like within the last week or two. Something that I've talked about was re-releasing Kadoja next year for the end, right, to celebrate the end. And recently we were talking about a cool way to do that, and we settled on re-releasing it in a smaller manga format, right? So manga inspired. And in doing that, so the cool thing about manga pages, most people probably know this, is that the ratio for them is really similar to American comics. If you shrink it down on one axis, it's like 73%.
Yeah.
If you shrink it down on the other, it's 75%. So it doesn't require much. But so it seems like, well, I'll just shrink them down, right? Except there is a lot of very small text in Kadoja. And by shrinking everything down, it made it unreadable, right? So what I then realized I need to do if I want to do this, and I want to do this, is I have to resize the dialogue. And if you resize the dialogue, the Rory put these balloons, and a lot of the letterers, the artists, put balloons in very careful places. So if it's this little bit, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, look at that. I got to be careful with my shapes.
Yeah, yeah.
Small bit. Wait, is this the thing that does like,
I think
isn't there some kind of, yeah. Where's
Where
my
is it?
lasers? All right, whatever. I see you try for the lasers and they don't happen. But
Oh, is it both? You got to do both, maybe?
I don't know. I'm not even enough in frame to do. Do you have to do like the massive one that I see people do at shows?
No, there should be.
Anyway, so like I realized I have to resize the text, and that means I have to rewrite the text. And so,
Right.
and it's the kind of thing where like I don't want to get a repetitive motion injury lettering 480 pages. Like that's what I have to do. I have to reletter 480 pages. So I did something very similar to what you're doing. I'm like, this needs to be done in March. The reason I want it done in March is so that I can get it all set up and send it to the printer in time for G-Fest, which is my biggest giant monster show out of the bunch. It seems as good a reason as any to have a whole lot of stuff that's, at least not new, but new format, and try to play with it a little. So I'm just trying to do 3 pages a day. But, I'm not going to do any next week because I am moving my kid into college. So there is wiggle room there, and I can make up for it or I can not make up for it. But it's about having that plan and sticking to 95% of it. And then you can worry about, doing 4 some days, or you get down to the end, you're like, screw it, I'll just do 10 today, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, now I had a couple questions about that. So when you say rewriting, you're not actually you're not changing, you're just like writing it bigger. Like you're not actually editing, revising.
Oh no, I am.
Oh, you are. So say if you see it like in a more efficient way, you're okay.
And now that I think about it, this is on a podcast Scott and I recorded, but that hasn't aired yet.
Okay.
Which is, given what we know about Scott, for those that are familiar with the Making Comics podcast, which Scott and I do, this is something he's talked about, that he's going to sort of re-release some of his books, especially I think the Second Shift, with master edition stuff, and then go back and rewrite. And my stance has sort of famously been, I just like it as is. Well, I didn't expect this monkey wrench. So, I think there is some degree of, you don't want to, I mean, the common thing we're going to bring up here is like Star Wars, right? The goal is not to have Greedo shoot first, but the goal is to fix obvious things, so right now it's really about just rewording for space. Maybe I was a little worried before because, it was the first comics I ever wrote. No big deal. But now that I can be, and now that I know I have this space, I got to say the same thing. And, a third of the, 2/3 of the words or something like that. And that means you're going to have to rephrase sentences entirely. You can say the English language is awesome. You can say things in 100 different ways, but you need to be clever with that. So I don't expect to rewrite much other than, just wording, clarity, size, things like that. And if I find an obvious flub, then I will fix it.
Is resizing dialogue bubbles on the table? Because I guess the problem you run into there is you're going to cover more artwork. So are you trying not to?
Yeah.
So you're trying to make it work in the existing art as best you can.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it comes down to it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you can look, you can relate to this, right? There might be a panel that has it might look exactly like this, like my panel right now on screen. And that means that right there is the space to put the dialogue, right? But there might be others where someone is talking and there's a huge white space off to the side. Well, I don't care as much.
Yeah, you could do, there could be one part up here and then the other part down. There's ways to kind of, Yeah,
I mean, and I've been creative I'm only 10 pages in or something like that. But yeah, I've already been doing it that way. And it's kind of fun. It'll be a little more fun when I'm not on page like 11 of about 480.
Yeah.
Because that's, you're like, I think you've used the analogy of looking up the mountain, like, holy shit.
No, that's a terrible number to even think about. So, okay, so here's then my last question. Are you going to go full manga and do it? I know the answer to this, but I just had to reverse order. Reading opposite, like an actual Japanese manga. Like, are you going to fully commit to the bit, or is it just manga size?
The answer is no. I think you knew the answer would be
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Look, is there an obvious fix on the table? There is. You could just mirror image everything, but
Yeah, I
you know,
guess.
but
It might
like
look weird.
in comic, mirror images might work.
Maybe.
I mean, I've found myself doing things like watching sports, like in the gym, and you'll look in the mirror and you'll be like, wow, if Kevin Durant was left-handed, his shot would still be perfect. It's
Right.
like you're just in this alternate dimension where almost everyone shoots left-handed, right? In basketball or
Right.
something like that. So I mean, theoretically, I could do it, but something I don't want to get too down the rabbit hole of, but that I want to at least acknowledge properly is that this is not manga. It is
Yes.
made by people in America, and I even spent time and asked my kids, and I was like, "What's the right way to refer to this?" And the answer is manga inspired, right? So it is
Yeah.
manga inspired. If it's manga inspired, then it can read like an American comic, and I expect that I'd be silly to not play with kanji, especially since we've done
Right.
posts before where Kadoja, I know how to write it in kanji, so it's it works, right? So anyway,
Well, at
so no,
least the
manga
cover.
inspired, not manga.
I mean, it's a new edition, so maybe at least the cover, like you
Yeah,
could
I mean,
do.
I'm hiring a new artist to do all
Yeah.
four actually.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know. I feel like it's something I can't remember. Again, another more recent idea is that because I've worked so far ahead in terms of being creative, that gives me some luxury here. And one of the things I really, really want to do is try to apply some degree of creativity to how I'm releasing it, how I'm promoting it, how I'm talking about it. Can I try anything? Like try to be a little more creative as a marketer, as my own marketer, as my own promoter, that kind of thing, and try to, resist the temptation of the empty page
Yeah.
because God, I just want to write.
Yeah.
I'm actually up here because I'm doing music, kind of off to the screen there. I
Oh,
came up to
cool.
the house so I could record guitars.
Yeah.
So and I love recording guitars. I love writing guitars, but it's harder to like release it, put a name out, talk about it, promote it. Think of any kind of new avenue. Especially when it comes to indie comics. I mean, I'm definitely interested in sort of ramming my head against a brick wall, figuratively, to try to figure out some new ways to get the book out there, to get people to pay attention, all that stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think it's a good thing, and I think that these little things like re-releasing something that's been my life for most of the last 12 years seems like a cool place to start, right? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it gets a bigger audience or a different audience, or like there's a cool visual signifier that you get with a manga inspired book, the size, the kanji, etc. Right? And then, I'll be honest about it. It's manga inspired, manga, whatever, right? But it's not
Yeah.
manga. And
Right.
then we go from there. And by the way, it's, it owes a debt to Japanese cinema in the form of giant monster movies, right?
It does. No, it totally fits. Like to me, a sort of quasi manga edition of it makes perfect sense.
Mhm. Yeah, it's fun. So what else you have? What else you have in front of you before you actually sit down? I mean, I missed some of the intro there.
Well, you talking about audiences and selling and everything, it reminded me I'm doing that Arizona Comic Book Arts Fest pop-up in a few weeks, which is just like, it's like 4 hours or 6 hours on a Saturday night. It's hardly anything. But, and I think I'll have to look. I probably have enough stock for it, because how much could you possibly sell in 4 or 6 hours? I mean, you don't have to kill yourself bringing piles of books. But I really wanted to use it as a low-risk test bed for some table options, because even though this is such a small event, it's still, I think, a 6 or an 8 foot table.
Nice.
So it's like, okay, well, we've talked about, especially after that last fan fusion, different ideas, different strategies, like how to draw people to the table, how to differentiate yourself from all the other people around you. I've been playing with the idea of maybe a more elaborate high up signage, approach that allows people to spot your booth from a distance and be intrigued just from that. There's something about that that's undeniably different from what every other banner is that they're going to see, whether it's a moving element or a light up element or something, just to make them say like, well, I should at least go see what that is, you know? So I feel like this is my opportunity to do that. And that cuts into my little to-do list of, you know, things I got to do before I start drawing. And what I was also thinking about is this also, if you're doing one thing, you're not doing the other things. So if I'm going to a pop-up on one particular Saturday in September, I'm not taking pictures of other people. I am not dialing in what the gas station looks like. I'm not, you know, figuring out, what is this cash register in 2001? Like, what kind of cash register would he be using? You know, like these weird kind of like micro questions that I try to anticipate before I'm drawing. I never can think of everything. I can tell you with almost every single DvsM, I'll be sitting down Saturday morning to start a new page and I'll start laying it out and realize, oh, what is that going to be? You know, and it just had never occurred to me that I had to draw, you know, what that desk chair is. What is, like, for example, in 79, you have a guard sitting behind a desk. What kind of desk? What kind of chair? What is on his desk? You know, like, what kind of stuff would he have? You know, like, what is this area? Like, I just never, you know, it's another example of, it's easy to write like guard station, you know, and just, you kind of don't really think about, no, but what is that? What does that look like? And it sends you on, at least, even the best case scenario, a half hour of, you know, Googling. And like, you know, I was looking at this just yesterday. It occurred to me, like, I'm going to have to figure out a cash register that would plausibly be in a rural gas station in 2001. And you're not going to do the old timey, like, cha-ching, cha-ching, you know, it's not going to be that, but it's also not going to be some top of the line Circle K thing. You know, it's going to be somewhere in between. And like, what would that? So then you start Googling 80s cash registers. Like maybe the guys had it for 15 years, 20 years, 90s cash registers.
Yeah.
And getting a little crash course and like, okay, it looks sort of like that. I can do something like that, you know, and just make right click save as, right click save as. So when I have to draw, it's like, okay, what is this going to be again? And you look at some examples and you're like, okay. I'm fine doing that day of drawing. It often happens day of drawing, but it does increase my stress level a little bit because every Saturday morning in my head, it's like punching in where now you have a week, draw this page. And if you spend 4 hours dicking around Googling, you know, how big is a case of beer? Like, I mean, not that you'd spend 4 hours, but whatever, like doing stuff like that, you're not drawing, you know, like, and if you really want to get the most out of this week, like you need to know where you're going. Like, I'm drawing this and this and this. I have my references. I've thought it all through. I have a good thumb. Let's go, you know, and just spend the week listening to podcasts and music and drawing, you know, rather than like furious Googling of like, oh my God, how does a knife clip to a belt?
Well, okay. You have a lot of things. You're jumping a lot of things in my head, but one of them is, you know, so like how can you cheat, Gary? Right? How can you cheat? Right? And you could cheat by going for obvious visual signifiers of era. And so my question back to you is that something? I mean, you know, like let's say I'm lazier than you. And I want to do this, you know, in an alternate universe, I'm the one who does DvsM. And I'm sitting there going, you know what, Gary? Alternate universe Keith that does DvsM says, I don't want to draw a cash register. So I'm just going to turn the counter around.
I'll frame it.
You just see like the pop-up screen that's like the cash register top with the total. And then I then draw a visual signifier of era. I mean, a Backstreet Boys poster. Not that I would ever do that, right? Yeah. But you can go for easy visual signifiers. Like, do you know, like, but I know you are obsessed with authenticity, right? So my
Yeah.
question to you is like, do you ever find yourself doing that kind of thing, or is it, is it like, do you love the authenticity for some reason that, like, one person out of 1,000 is going to know that, like, that
Right.
cigarette lighter was the most popular lighter in
Right.
2001?
Both. Though, like, for example, with the instance of the cash register, very quickly into my research, I realized the only real interesting things about a cash register are on the user side, like how the keys are laid out and, how the paper feeds and all that. And if you're a customer, you're not going to see that. And the way I've pictured these panels, you're never going to see the cashier side of a cash register. You're only going to see customer side. And in just the little bit of Googling I was doing, this is why I realized, like, okay, I'm not going to have to kill myself thinking about cash registers, because that's all pretty bait. Like, it's usually just like a very flat off-white plastic. And the only thing that's interesting is the little thing that shows the total. And to your point of, like, how do we indicate 2001 as opposed to modern day or as opposed to 1970s or something, is the liquid crystal display numbers, like that we all know, like our age, you remember, where like a 0 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little like polygons, and like numbers
old school
like,
alarm clock style. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So like it's like, okay, like, and once I saw that, it's like, to sell this as it's a 2001 cash register and you're going to see the total, like after he's done ringing up, he's going to say the total too, but like you're going to see that. That's how I indicate era, is like, we'll do the LCD numbers that we all kind of remember from that era, and that'll do it. And I don't even have to worry about the reverse side. So I don't have to worry about specific models. I don't have to worry about where is the key to turn it on. Like, it doesn't matter. You're not going to see it. I have also done, I can't think of specific examples, but I know I've done it a lot in DvsMs, where I'm looking at it. I don't know exactly what something looks like. It's not worth it to spend a bunch of time to figure it out. So I'm going to reframe this panel tighter so you don't see this thing I want to draw, and I think I do remember using that a little bit in 75 when it came to the Dodge Monaco's dashboard. There was some ambiguity about that specific year car dashboard and that specific model that I have them driving in. And I didn't want to commit to drawing it one way and potentially being wrong. I didn't want to get lost in the details of a dash with all the instrumentation on it. Like, it's like, this is going to take me forever to draw, and it does not matter. So, like, how can I frame these shots where we never see the dash? I think the only one that slips through is at one point you see him shifting from park to drive, and you see like that little indicator of the needle going over to drive. Like, I had that, like, that would be fun to draw. And you see a speedometer, but you never see like all the, where does it have an AC? What does the AC look like? Does it have this? Like, none of that. But in lieu of all that, yes, I'm open to cheating. Yes, I'm open to just leaving details out and just like, I can't get a good enough beat on this, so we're just not going to address it. I'm not above sometimes making up a brand, even though sometimes I like to put in real world brands. I'm also, there's one thing, they're buying a case of beer at one point in the story. I don't want to tempt fate by actually using a real beer brand, like, I don't know. So this is a little, I hope Jim doesn't mind me spoiling this. Jim has a fake commercial in his animation for Old Gold beer. It's like this just made up American beer. I was like, send me all your Old Gold assets so I can make a real world version of it. And they're going to be buying Old Gold beer, because I don't want to do it Coors or something. And
no, I think that's that's cool. I mean, I think it's, again, a couple other branches here, right? But to wrap up the other thought, at listening to you talk, it reminds me a lot of something that I try to obsess about in prose, writing novels. The one perfect detail. right?
Yeah.
And you know, the example Scott and I will come back to a lot from you is actually, I think he would smell like Old Spice.
Right.
That is a perfect detail. You know, like I remember getting a note on something in my prose where I described someone and I said she had her hair pulled back and was wearing turquoise rimmed glasses. And the person was like, I know everything I need to know about that
Right.
person.
It tells you a
Right.
lot.
And it's
Yeah.
boom. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting because that is what you're doing, right? You're searching for the one perfect detail visually, and of course, just like I have the option of not including that detail and, you know, saving it for the next time and just going with details that are still good but not, you know, not four words that nail it. You can do the same thing, right? You can have signifiers of error without going for that thing that is like, oh yeah, I totally crushed this, right?
Right.
And I think with that's me, you know, trying to wrap that up. But then in talking to, you know, using Jim's brand, brands are riveting because I think there is this fine line between real world and getting sued, right?
Right.
And it's funny
Right.
because I'm going to leave names and everything out of it, but we just read a submission through the Invader inbox, and the person had referenced a brand that is in fact fake, right? But you know, I was sitting there going like, I don't think I want this brand in there because it might be IP. This person's fake brand might be IP just like a real
Right.
brand. So you
Well,
need
like
to watch that too.
Tarantino's like Red Apple cigarettes.
Yeah, yeah.
I imagine you probably couldn't use that because Tarantino owns it. It's not a real thing, but then now you're
Yeah.
referencing some Tarantino thing. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So no, it's interesting to play with, right? And
Yeah.
nothing like having buddies that create brands too, right?
I
Like,
can
okay,
tell
cool.
you this book has a little mix of everything. There's some stuff like the Old Gold beer, where that's Jim's made up beer brand. I imagine being in a gas station, there'll probably be bags of chips and beef jerky and stuff that will be completely made up because I don't want to do like Slim Jims and, you know, like I don't like that's potentially, I don't know. And then it also creates, that's another good example of creates too much work. Because let's say my uncle worked at Slim Jim and it's fine. Like he said it was okay if I use Slim Jim. Now I got to go down the rabbit hole of what did Slim Jim packaging look like in 2001? I might as well hang myself. Like that sounds terrible. It sounds boring. So we'll just do. But that's also kind of it's a different challenge where if I, for example, end up with a rack of bags of chips, I got to come up with phony chips. You know, like what do they look like? You know, and so there will probably be creative framing, especially in the fill-up station where I'm giving you the suggestion of this space and that there's stuff in it and there's merch around. You're not getting a real clear view of anything. Like it's enough for you to know, like, oh yeah, it's a gas station. Yeah, you know, but I'm not like, there will not be a wide shot.
Yeah. You got to have a lot of extra fuel to burn there. I mean, Jeff Darrow did it, right? Jeff Darrow, for a lot of the Shaolin Cowboy stuff, would, you know, he took pride in those kind of things. So, you know, it's anywhere you want to fall, right? Like you can have fun with it. I mean, but I think I definitely like personally saving my ammunition for the stuff that matters, you know. Something I mentioned in that space is that I have a story. It's actually the second novel, sort of way out in the future, where I reference comics, and I created my own comics, and that was those are important, right? Like those are key pieces in the book, and it took a while. It took a while to sit there and think of like the exact right comics that invoke a certain comic from Marvel Comics or
Yeah.
invoke a certain comic from EC or whatever it is without doing it, right? And so yeah, it can be fun, but that doesn't mean you need to do it with everything. I mean, why would you want to? You know, the packaging of Slim Jim ain't essential to your goddamn story.
No.
So move on, right?
Yeah, right. Well, and that's also why it's like this is going to be a fun. I've never had to confront this in a DvsM, but you know, you've read the script, and this doesn't spoil anything. In the first few pages, you see guys buying a pile of snacks from a gas station, you know, and you'll probably be able to see some kind of a pile of things on this counter. I need it to be, and this will be the drawing challenge, and this is one that I'll probably just figure out the day of. It needs to be explicit enough where you can recognize that looks like maybe a thing of orange juice, that looks like jerky, that looks like chips, but vague enough where I don't have to get lost in the details of like, well, what kind of jerky or what kind of, like, but enough where it's not just, I don't want to do like how, you know, just to show the counter can't look like
live drawing. Look at this.
This can't be on the counter.
Yeah.
Just stuff. There's a pile. Yeah. You know, like it needs to look like things, and it needs to look like, oh, those are snacks. Those are, you're on a road trip. And you pull off and you're like, and you're getting out, and it's like, I'm gonna get myself like some beer. And they're like, oh, can you get me an orange juice? And then someone else is like, can you grab me some potato chips? So these guys are like, they're like, oh yeah, you know, this guy, he said grab him a Mars bar, whatever. Like, and you have this pile of stuff for the guys who are in the car. Like, it needs to immediately, you see that and you're like, yeah. That's the road trip stop for snacks. But again, not committing to like, there's a Snickers bar or something where it's like, I don't want to get into IP.
Yeah.
And I don't want to also spend half a day drawing a pile of shit on a counter when I got to draw the guy behind the register, the people buying things, the wall behind him, the like, you know, like real things that matter.
Yeah.
I wanted to quickly, Dylan, before you started drawing DvsM, did you have to learn to draw dinosaurs, or did you already know how to draw them? I have always been a dinosaur nerd. I love drawing dinosaurs, and I think I talk about it. I check to make sure. If you want to hear more about it and see, I think I might even have examples of like high school dinosaur drawings. If you go on my channel to the Making of DvsM 1997 concept design, if you find that video, it's like a 12-minute video or something. I talk a lot about paleo art. Let me scan real quick. I just want to make sure. I'm pretty sure. Yes, I see here in the, I'm just scrubbing it. You see dinosaur drawings of mine going back to like grade school. So, yes. Enjoy. I think we lost Pete's video.
Decided you want to come up?
Yeah. I gotta go take a dump.
Oh, sure.
Here, I'm muting him while he figures out what's going on. And Dylan, you should. And if for no other reason then, it's an era when I used to do more edited, crafted videos, you know? Yeah. And you'll be able to see the contrast. I hope it doesn't make you impatient and disgusted with just the live stream, unedited, unscripted. But the reason I got away from like shorter, tighter, edited, like topic videos is, and Keith will know this just from editing a podcast, as soon as you get into editing, the amount of time it takes to get something out, it gets stupid. And it's not something I can do when I'm actively working on things. Like if I'm drawing a comic or trying to do prep or trying to write a script, I don't have time to be editing videos. In the times in between, those couple months where I'm off between books, then it's easier for me to sit and do a polished night. That's when you see things like the character analysis videos I put out. That's usually when I'm in between books because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, you don't have someone competing.
Yes, yeah. And, you know, that becomes the project. Making the video is the project, which I intend to do. I still have to do a character creation and analysis for Dr. Wagner in 79, but it won't be till next year probably. Unless I, don't get your hopes up, people, but unless I squeeze it out last minute before I start drawing this one that I'm working on. Like that would be my last chance, because once I'm drawing it. Okay. So, how long are you up at the mountain house?
I'm just here today.
Just today.
Actually, that was my wife. So she had wrapped up some stuff and actually drove up the mountain. So
oh, cool.
she may grace us with her presence in the background.
Okay.
But yeah. I mean, it's the first time that I've recorded guitars here, so I'm excited.
That's
About
cool.
I don't know, they sound pretty good. The cool thing about recording, I mean, Jim was talking about this, like the microphone in this, it's real damn good, man. It's real good.
I mean, something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and that's a good example of it. This really is like the future. Like a lot of people make jokes about where are flying cars, where are, whatever. It's like, when you think about the things that, I don't want to wax, philosophical here too long, but when you think about the things that are available to us, especially like in the privileged part of the world, like in the United States of America, if you're not scraping to get by, like if you have some money, it is as future as any sci-fi you can think of. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like just the other day, I was actually, it wasn't the other day, it was a couple months ago, I was thinking about this. I was cooking dinner. I found a recipe in a book for some Mediterranean dish I wanted to try. I was able to get all these ingredients, none of which would be naturally locally grown, like weird spices and weird things that I can now get a 5-minute drive away at Whole Foods, like that's all available to me. Or if I need a weirdo spice, I can order it on Amazon and in 2 days it appears on my doorstep. This exotic spice that's only grown overseas or whatever. While I'm cooking on this gas range, or in my house, climate controlled when it's 110 degrees out and I have AC, I can pull this out, Bluetooth it to a speaker and play any music in the world that's ever been made, to entertain me while I'm doing, like, this is crazy. It's crazy. And I think not that there aren't bad things in the world, not that there isn't progress to be made in all sorts of areas, not that it isn't only our little nice lucky island of the world where there's other parts of the world. Like, I mean, if you're in parts of Ukraine right now, it does not feel like the future. If you're in parts of Syria or Gaza, it doesn't feel like the future. It feels like Mad Max, but in these little corners, it's as close to idyllic, fantasy paradise future that any sci-fi writer envisioned 100 years ago. It's pretty crazy.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I find myself in a lot of, recently, right? And it's probably just who I am, but I find myself in a lot of conversations about music. And, something I've told 2 of my kids in different contexts over the last 2 or 3 weeks is, when I was growing up, when I was growing up,
in my day,
and if you wanted to be cool and know about music, you bought it. You had a deeper collection than everybody else, and that's just not the case now. My current thing is that the biggest amount of homework I'm giving myself is trying to figure out as much about Japanese jazz music as possible, because I'm going to Japan in 2 months. And I bought this amazing book. Actually, it was up here at the Mountain House. It's 400 pages. It's hardbound. It's giant. It's the size of a record. It's very heavy. And it has photos of hundreds of jazz albums in the back. It has lists. It has top 10 Japanese jazz records from every person that contributed to the book, which of course these people know their stuff. So I have started to go through that. Everything is on YouTube, dude. Everything. So it's like, as I am trying to figure out whether to make a buying decision, whether I want this thing as part of my collection, in the meantime, I get to listen to every single record on YouTube, right? And it's like, it definitely also slams up against the collector mentality that I think people of my generation deal with a lot. You get cool shit, as opposed to, it's just there whenever I want it, and even now I'm like, is it really there whenever I want it? What if Spotify goes under, then my records pay off, you son of a bitch, right? Like, how do you like me now? Right. But YouTube, I mean, you got to feel like YouTube's pretty safe. I mean, Google owns the damn thing, but it's like, it's everything, dude, and so what I'll do is I will listen to a record on YouTube And then if it's good, I throw it over to a list on Discogs, right? Speaking of technology. And
Yeah.
that way, when I go to Japan, I can be like, okay, have I seen this record before? Is it in my want list? And then I can I should be able to queue up my want list and then look at it, and not just look at it, but look at what the going price is, right? So I can be like, this is a good deal, this is a bad deal. But some of them, as I put in my list, it's like, this is a $2,000 record. It's right here.
Right.
Like it's
I can
great.
listen to it. I just can't own the physical original. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're right. There are, look, not to say, we didn't get the flying cars we were promised.
Right.
But I mean,
It's
I
not
did see
encouraged.
that quote in the chat of like, do we need a flying car? We can barely handle four-wheel ones right now, right?
That's true. No, it was a good point. And well,
Yeah.
and we haven't eliminated cancer. Like there are
Yeah.
things,
Yes.
like, I mean, of course, but there's also, I mean, just in my lifetime, I was reading something about this the other day. Like I'm old enough, you are too, to remember when AIDS first landed. And terrifying. And people were dying protracted, terrible deaths, when this thing, and it was like a death sentence to be HIV. Like it's just like, well, now the clock is ticking. There are drugs now, they're overpriced. Not everyone has access to them. Like, again, there's still room to go, but there are drugs now which is mind-blowing for me and you probably, who remembers what AIDS was, where they can live basically a normal life and a normal length life while being HIV positive. Like in this little lifetime. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it makes, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, it makes the movie, makes the musical Rent feel strange, right?
And Philadelphia, that movie, Philadelphia.
Yeah. I mean, but I remember that, like I think I've seen Rent twice in my life. I went with somebody 15 years ago or something. And this was after I had worked for a drug company, and they said, take your AZT or something like that. And I was like, that's right. AZT was like the only thing you could use to keep it at bay way back in the day before, 40 drugs came out that could pretty much treat it. Right. So yeah, it is crazy.
Right. No, it's crazy. It's amazing. And going back to the music thing, yeah, you're right. You either had to blind buy music, which is, I mean, that's something that I think the kids today, but whatever, like they probably can't even, because I mean, a lot of people I think just consume music for free. The idea of even paying for music is strange, I think, to a certain generation. But not only were you paying for music, if you wanted to learn new music, if you wanted to try something, maybe it was recommended to you, whatever, but you've never heard it before, or you like the look of the album, or you like other stuff these people had done, whatever the situation was, you just have to drop $20 and see how it goes. Like that, and even if you thought it was meh or you didn't like it, well, now you own a record, or now you own a CD, tape, or whatever. But then, or you had to go to shows. And that's another thing. Like if you weren't in one of those two realms, the odds that you're going to discover new music is now way down. But I was thinking about, yes, when we were on the retreat, we were listening to a lot of the Japanese jazz that you were playing, which was great music, good creative background music. Like it's nice, like just a good soundtrack, good background. And, you were playing that. I knew almost nothing about Japanese jazz. There's a game series I like, a video game series that does a lot of, it's out of Japan, it has jazz. So like some of it was like, oh yeah, it kind of has that feel. But I didn't know a lot about it. I don't think Josh Kemble knew anything about it. And he said on Artcasters last time, now I'm on a Japanese jazz kick. Again, this is only the future that can do this, where you discovered this, you played it, now he heard it, now he can go to Spotify or whatever and just gorge on Japanese jazz over the next couple weeks. It's kind of incredible.
No, it is pretty cool. I mean, so something I wanted to get back to, and it's one of these like conundrums. I'm not sure if there's any point, right? But I mean, so right. It's this idea of creating a relic of time, right? So something that's interesting that you're doing is you are doing a bunch of different stories, none of which are set in the present, right? And so what you're doing is you're sort of creating documents, or you are consulting documents of a time, you know. Um, Something I one of my favorite things about like fiction and all kinds of things like that is that they are documents of the time. And the best part about a lot of it is they don't realize they are being documents of a time. You know, like we've talked about sci-fi a lot, and I'm sure you've read like old sci-fi and stuff.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about old sci-fi is it's it is in, you know, like I'm sure people back in the day were writing sci-fi and they're going to be like, this is futuristic, this is, you know, whatever, this is, you know, this is going to be timeless. I'm sure at least one author thought that when they were writing it in 1933, 1963, 1993, somebody that wrote it 2 years ago, right, or a year
Right.
ago, whatever. The But every single time what you're really doing is creating a document of your own present time, because you're limited by the amount of knowledge you have about science,
Mhm.
and you are constrained without realizing it in terms of the other things people are thinking about it. And that's not bad, right? Like we're all informed by the thoughts that are swirling around. So I find that kind of stuff riveting, right?
Yeah.
Because it it makes you realize that you are creating a document of a time, whether you're trying to or not. You know. So anyway, I don't have a point. I just think that
No,
that's
I think it's interesting, and it made me. I think one of the larger goals of the DvsM series is, yeah, all of them are taking place in very distinct kind of eras in the past 50 years. And trying to balance, like, you know, 1975 was very different from 1997, what, you know,
Mhm.
obviously, but also this sort of commonalities. And I would like to believe, and this is what I'm trying to do with it. It's not the point of it, but it's something that I think is important to get right, is that all these characters are equally relatable, whether they're using cell phones or wired phones, whether they're driving, you know, a manual transmission old piece of shit, or some modern, you know, it doesn't, like, it's the human experience is pretty timeless. And that creates, in addition to the plot elements, like a through line through all of this. I would like to think that close readers of DvsM already, but especially once they're all done, will see the commonalities, the common threads, the common themes that keep coming, you know, these repeated, the George Lucas thing, it rhymes, it's like poetry. Like, there is something. And I feel like so far, knock on wood, I've been successful at this. Every DvsM, even though it's different characters in different eras, feels like a DvsM. And like that, I think, is like it's maybe trickier to accomplish than people might think. You know, like to get it where every time it's like a premiere, you know, every time it's a new character. Like I'm kind of, to some extent, taking everything I've established in the previous books and throwing it away, and kind of like, I'm going to tell you another story in this universe, and yet it still feels, you know, like it kind of fits to the other one, even though there's no explicit important connection. Anyway.
No, I that makes sense. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, sort of what you're saying is the larger thought of like it, you know, not to get too grand about it or anything, but like it ties to the commonality of story. You know,
Right.
something else that I find riveting, maybe not about the sci-fi books that I've read from like 1933, but you can read a novel from the 70s, 1970s. I can
Yeah.
even read some old stuff from the 1890s or whatever, and you'll come across a certain thing and you'll be like, that sounds like it could have been written today. You know,
Yeah.
like people, because people are still people and we still
Yes.
go through the world in our own way. And there are these commonalities of experience across time, across culture, across all those things. So, you know, for me, one of my favorite things about engaging with fiction on any level, and it's why so many, you know, every story is interesting, right? Because
Right.
there's always going to be that commonality that we can all come back to.
Because it's always what it should boil down to. I mean, that's a very, like, you know, fiction 101 thing, but at the end of the day, every story should be relatable in some way. Like you don't, someone out there will argue against, and I would sit and listen to the argument, but you don't want a totally abstract, surreal, nonsensical story that is completely, impossible to relate to on a normal everyday. Like you need something, like you need something. If you're going to paint this like Jackson Pollock nonsense, at least colors I've seen before. Like give me some entry, and I think, definitely.
And I think too that like, I'm thinking of like a sort of pop culture thing, and I'm not going to delve into anything other than like general stuff. But there's a podcast I listen to, and one of argument that I've sort of stolen from him that's fun to think about is, obviously social media influences so much of what we do. And so let's just say there's a topic in the news. It doesn't matter what the topic is, but people are opposed on it.
Yes.
The fun theoretical he will do a lot of the time is he will say, so if the internet existed as we know it in 1921, what kind of vile shit would you be reading online? Right. And I think so, I think it's easy to say we, for all this stuff we haven't progressed and whatever. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I get the feeling that if we could actually go back and check tweets from 1921, we'd realize we've progressed quite a bit, right? The social media creates a window into everyone's life that we just never had before, right?
Yeah.
And again, I that ties in generally, and I'm not smart enough to figure out how it ties into what we're talking about, but I'll let other people figure that out.
No, I agree. I think, and that's a little bit like, the we're in the future, not to say there isn't room for improvement. I mean, I think while I do tend to believe that when we talk about toxicity on the internet, it's seeing it, like you didn't get to see it before, you were blissfully unaware that there were people who thought these things or felt this way or talked way or whatever, because you just never encountered it. And I agree. I think some of the shock of it, it's I don't know, this is like only a rough analogy, but I remember I did in high school and college a lot of food service work, worked in a lot of restaurants, and the rule was for every roach you see, there are 10 more somewhere, like, so, and you just kind of understood, like, you're only getting like the tip of the iceberg. I think with the internet, you see the full fucking iceberg. Like you see,
I see every roach.
Yeah, exactly. And so it looks like, oh my God, the roach situation has exploded. And it's like, not really. You just know where they are now, and you're seeing them.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, there was, I remember also another thing I think about is I have a little bit of, academically, I did a little bit of like criminal justice stuff. And there's this kind of what seems like, it seems like it doesn't make sense, but it actually makes perfect sense. So let's say you have a high crime area, or an area that you're worried about the crime rate. Okay. So you're like, we're going to take care of this. We're going to put more cops in that area, more patrols, more presence. We're going to be more responsive. We're going to really pay attention to this area. And what you would see is if you do this, the crime rate goes up. And like a lot of people like, what the hell's happening? Like whatever you're doing, you're making it worse. No. Crimes were not getting reported before. They were not being noticed before. They were not like
detection.
Yes. Now now you see all 11 roaches, like you're putting police there. And so it seems like, oh, the crime rate's going up. No, you're actually being more effective.
Yeah. Or to bring it back to your, something you talked about in terms of technological advances, cancer. It was something that jumped in my head, right? Like, breast cancer cases have gone up for quite a while. Well, that's because the detection's getting better and better.
Right.
survival rate is also going way up because it's being detected so early that it can be treated and people can just live with it, right? So yes,
Exactly.
yeah, that's why you got to watch sometimes the statistics, right?
Yes.
Because they might be indicating something else.
Yeah, if you all you have to do is take one college level statistics class or read a book if you want to torture yourself like that, and you'll see that it's really important how it's presented. One I just encountered recently, this is now going off topic, but I find it interesting, is talking about murder rates and how murder rates seem to have been trending down for a long time. And that's, of course, good. The problem is, like, looking at that number is we've also seen far better emergency trauma care. So the odds, if you get shot or stabbed, that you're going to die have gone down. Yeah. So the murder rate has gone down. What if you really want to get at, like, if you want to talk about violent crime, it might be more effective to just look at how many times are people stabbed or shot. Because if you're only looking at deaths, that's going to get clouded by, well, how good, what kind of hospitals do you have nearby? Are you in an urban area? What's the response time? Like, what kind of trauma center do you have near? Like, that's all going to play into, like, murder rates, you know? Exactly. I was just reading a thing the other day about how cancer rates have been on the rise the past 10 years or something. And it's a very open question. Are they going up, or are we getting better at catching? And maybe the more useful thing, this is almost the opposite of the murder rate thing. How many people die from cancer? That might be the more useful number to look at, because, yeah, the number of incidents might be going up, but if we're catching it, is that so horrendous? I mean, that's better, right? But,
right. So just so you know, I'm going to get back to recording guitars here, so I'm probably going to jump in a second.
I usually shoot for about an hour and a half, but see here if there's. I've heard that AI can detect cancer up to 5 years before it develops, or something like that. Yeah, I think I read something. I don't know the facts of it or if it's even factual, but I would not be shocked, just because there was a great NPR did a whole expanded thing on it years ago, that Target has effectively AI predicting your shopping habits. They look at, so when you go in and you put in your number or you use the same debit card, it goes into this profile. These are the things you buy. And by looking at that information over months and years, Target, in this example, had gotten very good at predicting the sorts of things you might want to buy, like when and how often, and kind of actually project forward. And it came up because this guy, his teenage daughter, who was like 15 or 16, she had her own Target account and she was going and buying things. And Target started sending her coupons for, like, diapers and, like baby kind of things. And her dad called bullshit and lost his mind and, wrote angry emails to Target and called them up and, like, this is totally inappropriate. My daughter's 15 years old, sending coupons for baby powder and diapers, and, like, all this kind of stuff, baby wipes. And wouldn't you know it, she ended up pregnant within a couple months. And it was this kind of thing of, like, somehow with what she was buying, maybe it was a lot of birth control stuff, who knows? Right. It kind of, like, flagged something in Target's system. Like, no one at Target is sitting there thinking, like, send that girl diaper coupons. Like, it's going into this machine that was saying, like, this seems like a likely thing that she's going to be buying. And it proposed it, and it was right. If Target can do that, I wouldn't be shocked if they could build an AI that could say, based on your age, based on your sex, based on your medical history, based on your past few physicals, like, we predict you're going to have cancer in the next 8 years. That would be horrifying, but also be useful to know.
I mean, what can't Allen Iverson do?
What can't? I mean, he's just a dynamo. He's
the answer. Exactly.
Yeah, as an old guy, I'm not going to speak for other Gen Xers. Some of these young gens are actually kind of a pain in the ass. I'm sorry. Because I remember my gen, and they're uniquely pain in the assy. The young gens, but that's just my hot Most, yeah. Well, and that's a question. I could do a whole thing about the rise of fascination and the flat earth thing. It is so, I had to believe for a long time now, oh, these are just trolls. They don't really believe. Like I follow NASA on Facebook. Any post they do from space, you see like laughing emojis, like in the reaction. And if you don't do it, I don't recommend it. But if you click through the comments, there's like every fourth post is like, great CG, NASA. You know, like, I mean, they're just like, they totally don't buy it at all. Some of it is, I think there's been dummies in every era. I think this era is different where it's a weird political thing. Like if you have made your whole identity, the government and the media lies to you, and like that's your whole thing, there are necessary conclusions you have to make where like you just have to be contrarian about everything. I think it's a minor form of mental illness, but whatever. Okay.
All right, man. I'm gonna hop off.
I'm gonna log off too. But thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, talk to you soon.
Oh, and by the way, Making Comics new podcast tomorrow.
Yeah, every Monday.
Guests will be Jim Lujan and Gary Hodges.
Yes, that's right. It's the recap, part 2 of the Crestline recap with him and also Jim Lujan, and they'll be talking about what they did to Crestline.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, man. So, talk to you soon.
Looking forward to it because I don't even remember what I said. So anyway, see you later. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, it's a political thing. Same with the vax topic. Like there's always been an anti-vax movement, but now I think they've incorporated elements of like the anti-government, anti-establishment, anti-expert, you know, it's the thing, if you believe the government and scientists lie, therefore, like you kind of have to, you know, at least be open to the possibility that, you know, vaccines either don't do anything and or cause damage and or are risk, whatever, you know. There's just, so yeah, I think it's a muddier thing. There's a book, I've referenced it in past videos, I'll always reference it. It actually kind of helped me contextualize a lot of what we see now in American culture, not just American culture, but mostly American culture. It's by Andrew Keen. I believe it's Keen. It's called The Cult of the Amateur. And the basic premise is one unfortunate side effect of the democratization of everything with the internet. So everyone can be a musician, everyone can be a model, everyone can be like some kind of a creative. You don't have to go through a publisher, you can self-publish. You don't have to be an expert on anything, you can start a YouTube channel and start commenting on the war in Ukraine. Like the rise of the amateur voice, basically. While in some ways it's been fantastic. Marginalized voices, marginalized topics, you know, it allows a lot of things to be elevated and get some exposure that would never have found a way to get exposure in the past. The dark side of that is this rise in skepticism or outright rejection of expertise. This idea that Jenny McCarthy is a worthy half of a debate against some immunologist talking about vaccines. Like that, you know, that, and, you know, I generally, and I still intend to be not very political on my YouTube channel, but that, for example, a real estate developer and game show host knows enough to be president. You know, whatever. Like, that is something that is very recent. And Keene would probably argue is tied to the rise of the internet and the rise of the democratization of everything. This idea that expertise is not only not necessary, but you should be suspicious of it. And that it's almost a mark against you. That, for example, if like we're talking about, do the COVID vaccines, are they necessary and are they safe? If you get someone like Fauci, you know, who knows a lot about vaccines and has spent his entire life in this field, it has become something of not just not as valuable as a non-expert's opinion, but almost a strike against them. That is the cult of the amateur. They're like this new generation where, oh yeah, see, that's a perfect example, Dylan. Graham Hancock. This is the cult of the amateur in action. Graham Hancock's been around forever. Okay, I read Graham Hancock books back, I think, when I was in high school or college. But he's got this like new life now because the terrain is so perfect. Like, he was just kind of, I think, you know, he had a small, you know, following, and, you know, he was successful. He made a career out of doing the kind of thing he does now. But I think now the environment is better for someone like a Graham Hancock, who is not an archaeologist, who's not a historian, who's not even any kind of a scientist. He's a writer. He was a journalist. He's, you know, he writes books. And yeah, I mean, he knows just enough to kind of tell a story in a compelling way. But, and you know, like, I could try to be kinder about it, but as someone who was actually an archaeology major, knows enough about the topic to know that he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But he's banking on two things. That the public knows even less than him. Okay. Fair. And second, there's now this inherent, not with everybody, but with a large part of the population, an inherent skepticism of people who do know what they're talking about. That there's this built-in accepted idea that there is some sort of monolith establishment out there promoting ideas or narratives or whatever that aren't necessarily true, and that maybe they even know aren't necessarily true, but there's for reasons. And anyone who wants to actually express like a real counterpoint, a real potential alternative explanation, whatever, is like actively like white blood cells in the body, like rejecting this pathogen as hard and aggressively as possible. And that's like how Hancock paints himself. And I think in this so-called cult of the amateur era we're in, Hancock is like, he's a great example of this, where I feel like in any other era, he would not be near, we wouldn't even know his name. Or if you did, it was like a weird fringe thing. It would be like Chariots of the Gods or something. It'd be something that people who are into like wonky alternative ideas might know him. But it's like he wouldn't be on network TV. He wouldn't be being interviewed by a newspaper because he's just not a serious person. But today, he could have some clout. Over the years, I've seen new YouTube pastors and religious leaders with sociology degrees. Yeah, I mean, I would think. Look, I remember I was an anthropology major. Archaeology is a subfield of anthropology, and it was understood when I was in college, in the university, that I don't know if this is still the case, But the CIA would actively recruit from anthropology departments, because if your ethics skewed the right way or your politics skewed the right way, and you're a cultural anthropologist, some kind of a social anthropologist, you understand people and you understand communities and societies. You understand how potentially to motivate, to inspire, to manipulate, to, you kind of is a little with anthropology and also sociology, also the psychology, social psychology, especially, which usually really gets into it. There's an element of seeing the matrix. Like you have a sense, and it's also, it creates a dispassion. People might be surprised if they follow my Facebook, where I will share more political things. I am not an overly political person. For most of my life, I was fairly disengaged from politics and very much like one of those kind of third-party voters, like an independent, whatever. It's only been in the past few years I've been more active, because I've been really struck by one side of the political equation more than the other, and how extreme it seems to me, but also kind of what I'm talking about here, how I feel like I see how this is working, and that's what's disturbing about it to me. That it's appealing to people in a very on a very kind of basic and scary level, motivating them in ways that's alarming to me, throwing out ideas that to me are a little shocking, and that I don't remember anyone openly running for major office talking about in the past. Like, there's just a lot where it's like, whoa, like this is a little surprising to me. And I'm a fairly cynical, jaded guy who's not easily shocked. But so, I mean, the past few years, yeah, maybe in the past like 8 or so, I've been way more interested in politics and engaged in politics than I ever was. And I dream of someday being able to be less engaged in politics. So, anyway, okay. Let's see here. Just found an ex-Mormon, and she made me a reel about how the CIA like to hire Mormons. That's interesting. Huh. I saw a post yesterday about how some Trump wearing Trump dictator shirts. Not surprised. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, and we all do. I think the key with Dunning-Kruger is being aware of the existence of Dunning-Kruger, and just knowing that. This is why, but Dunning-Kruger is interesting, and this is the last I'll talk about it. Dunning-Kruger is why I believe Hancock, people like Hancock, don't buy their own pitch. Like, I believe Hancock actually is a grifter, because however unqualified he is, like, you could use Dunning-Kruger to explain maybe his first book or his second book. Now we're talking about decades of looking at this stuff, once in a while having debates, once in a while talking to people who are actually in the field, who know what they're talking about, who know what they're doing. I have trouble believing that after all this time, and all the studying he's done, and all the writing he's done, and all the talking he's done, and all the, whether he liked it or not, meeting people who know better than him, he's done. I find it very hard to believe he's not dimly aware of how dishonest and clumsy and flawed his arguments and what he's proposing is. He has to know, he has to at least have an inkling when he's writing about some of this stuff. I actually don't understand this as well as people who have spent their entire career studying this rigorously with peer review, like doing all the things. I'm just kind of throwing this out there. He has to know. He's not a dummy. So to me, that leaves me only with two options. Either he's just a grifter. He knows most of what he says is just pseudo-history entertainment bullshit. Or he's mentally ill. It's one or the other. Like in either case, like I can't deal with Graham Hancock. I feel the same way about Alex Jones. I think he probably skews more on the side of like, I think he actually has problems. Like I don't think he's well. But it's one or the other, because he's been in the game long enough to have been, even against his will, introduced to the counterpoints to some of his insane things that he said. So, but whatever. Okay. I didn't expect to go in this direction, but whatever. Let's see here. Last year I debated a guy in IG comments that was saying Zeus is black. Looked it up as best I could. Supposedly there evidence that says Zeus. Jesus. You know, there's, again, not to pull out my modest college career again, but my minor was comparative religion. There is nothing more insufferable and also very cult of the amateur than engaging with some edgelord on the history of religion. Good Lord, you want to hang yourself. No pun intended, good Lord. But I mean, like, oh my God. I remember one of the worst movie experiences I've ever had in my life was watching, can I remember the name of this? It's a pseudo documentary. I mean, it's a documentary, but it's like it's all bullshit. 100% wall-to-wall bullshit. I think it's called Zeitgeist. I don't encourage you to watch it, but you can look it up if you want. It had 3 parts. One was basically a truther 9/11 thing about how it was all fake and staged and false flag and all of that. One part was how all of Christianity is like repackaged Egyptian Babylonian myth, and that there was no historical Jesus whatsoever, and it's all just a great big con. And then the last was something that was this vaguely anti-Semitic banking Illuminati thing. And it was shared like crazy on YouTube back when I first encountered it, which would have been like in the late 2000s. And normally, like, I'm fine with kooky beliefs, and I kind of enjoy some conspiracy theories as like fun and entertaining. I was actively angry after I watched this movie. I could not believe the stuff they were putting out there as factual. And like even the narrator was this very like hushed tones, like, I'm telling you the truth about this stuff that you don't know, and you better listen up. It's amazing because everything you've been told is a lie. Like it was, and I could, and even me, just your average everyday moron, it was almost once a minute or once every 2 minutes, there would be a claim made that was demonstrably false. On its face, just ridiculous. Easily disproven if you bothered to look. But again, cult of the amateur. If you're in this environment where the mainstream lies to you, the government lies to you, all that's left is stuff like Joe Rogan and these documentaries that are made on YouTube by people who may not even be in the United States. Like, I mean, it's like, well, I guess this is real. Maybe we didn't go to the moon. Like, it makes my head explode. Okay. All right. that is enough for the day. 2 hours. Thanks everyone who watched this. So I will be back in 2 weeks, whatever that is. Let's look at the calendar. September 1st. I am hoping by then, all the things I listed early on that I need to get done, I've checked at least some of that off the list, or have things like scheduled, lined up, going to happen on this date, we're on track. That's my hope. But since I don't know, like really, like if there'll be a clear topic, since I won't be drawing yet, probably try to round up some guests. Maybe I'll come up with a topic. We'll see. Tune in 2 weeks to find out. Anyway, hope you guys have a good 2 weeks. Dylan, thanks for dropping by. Paul, thanks for dropping by. Cats and Comics, thanks for dropping by. Everyone who stopped in. Keith, go check out Keith. Check out the Making Comics podcast. Also check out the Artcasters. Rotates on channels. Josh Kemble, Corey Kerr, Scott Cirkland. Check out all their work. Buy everybody's everything. All right. See you next time.